Epiphany Sunday, the three wise men came to Jesus in Bethlehem. I have clearly stated in years past, I have always loved the three wise men. Sometimes they're called the Magi or the three kings, but whatever the case, it's the same folks. The wise men represented the people who were willing to recognize Jesus even though they weren't Jewish or lived around the area where Jesus lived. They represent all the people around the world who are open to the revelation of Christ. So in essence, when you get down to it, there are three sorts of people who saw Jesus for who he truly was. For one, there were the people that knew him personally, Mary and Joseph, the people he directly healed, the disciples, Mary Magdalene, etc. The second sort of people who knew Jesus were the shepherds. They knew that they knew nothing, and therefore they were teachable. They were totally aware that they were not educated folks in any real way, and so they were able to see Christ with an innocence that was not unlike that of a child. Humility leads to Christ. The wise men were the third kind of people who got Jesus because they knew that they didn't know everything. That's what made them wise. They knew enough to see how grand creation is and therefore how grand the Creator is, and that is the other side of humility. Humility through experience and or awareness, which also leads to Christ. Things don't go so well in the middle of those two states. And that's a little odd because it's normally the other way around. Normally it's the middle way that leads to Christ, and the extremes cause us to veer off the path. But when it comes to knowledge, the middle, it's kind of a precarious place to be in. It's like the old cliche says, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Basically, what that quote refers to is, if you know nothing, then you're open to the lesson. It's easy to teach someone starting from square one. And when someone is essentially a master of a certain subject, they probably realize just how much more is out there. They probably have a grasp on the true scale of things. It's when a man has a few scraps of information, that's when he gets into trouble. Because he easily gets full of himself, and he starts to think that he knows more than he actually does. So the other quote that comes to mind is that truth is never possessed by the man who has read one book. The wise men are wise, not because they have read more than one book each. They were, of course, well educated, no doubt about that, but knowledge doesn't make a person wise. Knowledge makes a person knowledgeable. And knowledgeable fools are a dime a dozen in 2022. The wise men were wise because they accepted their knowledge with humility and self-awareness. That is less common in 2022. These wise men knew that they were not the masters of reality. They didn't claim to be gods or heroes or the apex of human capacity. They knew how small they were in view of the world, and as a result of that, they were able to kneel before Christ, no problem. So at this point, to illustrate it a little bit more, allow me to summarize the legacies and attitudes of two men from history. One was a great wise man of the church. The other was a profound but knowledgeable fool who despised the church, and in particular, the work of the first guy. So this first guy I'm referring to is Saint Thomas Aquinas, the wise man of the Catholic faith, in my opinion, one of the great doctors. And his masterpiece was called the Summa Theologica, which was just a gigantic brick of a document. I pity the people in history that had to have a hardcover copy of that thing. It must have weighed a ton. But don't worry, you can be like me. You can get the whole thing in ebook form for 99 cents. Good deal. St. Thomas Aquinas was a true scholar in the full sense of the word because he wrote a little something about everything, but mostly theology because that was his specialty. And as the story goes, when he was nearing the end of his life, he had a personal revelation. Maybe it was a dream, who knows? But he got a greater glimpse of Christ's great plan for humanity. And after that day, he said plainly and boldly that everything he had written was like so much straw in the fire of the Holy Spirit. All his knowledge and writings and arguments, a lifetime of scholarly work, he said it was basically of the slightest possible significance in light of the true nature of Christ. That is a wise man moment if I've ever heard one. Thomas Aquinas would never have let his facts and information get in the way of kneeling before the baby Jesus, assuming, of course, he got the chance. So the other guy, you've probably heard of him, was Voltaire, a French Revolution era guy. Oh, he hated the church. And he would have been right at home today with certain social media platforms. Some historical figures, I don't think they would have adapted to the internet and social media very well. Oh, Voltaire would have been totally into it. The way he would rile up people, the way he would make arguments convincing and passionate, oh, he would have loved the tools that are available today. He hemmed and hawed at Christ, and he was very much interested in inventing his own religion. So as this story goes, he obtained a copy of the Summa Theologica, which was not that hard. It was a fairly common book, relatively speaking. And what he did was he wrote down all of the objections to the faith that Thomas Aquinas included in the book. Because you see, Aquinas' style of writing was extremely consistent. So first, he would ask a question. Do angels have free will? Or do the dual natures of Christ, can they be separated? Questions like that. And then he'd provide a few partial or incorrect answers that other people might plausibly respond with. Then he'd give the correct answer. Then he'd explain why it was the correct answer. And then he'd finish up with addressing the issues or flaws of those first imperfect answers. So that's the way he wrote the entire book, extremely consistently. So Voltaire, in his eagerness to defame the church, he wrote down and studied the wrong and incomplete answers to the questions, and he never bothered to read the actual answer or its explanation. I laugh at that story because it's so pathetic. It's pathetic. It's a guy with no intention of growing in knowledge and truth, intentionally studying the wrong answers to questions for the express intention of expressing his contempt for spiritual authority. That is the opposite of what wisdom looks like. That is foolishness and pride at least 3 or 4 times over. And Voltaire was well educated. He knew what he was talking about when it came to politics and other worldly matters. He was very witty in certain contexts, but a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. He knew just enough of the world that he came to believe that he basically had an answer for everything, and anyone who disagreed or opposed him was a threat to be eliminated. And Voltaire would literally rather die than kneel before Christ. Getting back to the 3 kinds of people who know Jesus. I don't believe that any of you are shepherds in this way. I realize that some of you actually do raise sheep from time to time. None of you are shepherds in that you know nothing, except for maybe a few of you that are 2 or 3 years old, maybe. And you don't know Christ the way Joseph or Mary Magdalene did, because you were born 2,000 years too late for that. Sorry, them's the breaks. So your best bet is to be like the 3 wise men. You should grow in your knowledge and understanding to the point where you realize how little you know. Because once you know enough about the world to see how amazing and infinite it really is, then your relationship with Christ will grow as a result. And that growth with Christ, through humility and self-awareness, that is the spiritual heart of what it means to be truly wise.